Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be taking you back through an elite race at the Zwift World Series that happened about 2 or 3 months ago, where a whole bunch of us raced up the grade, which is that ridiculously steep, straight and also squiggly climb that has been introduced to Zwift this winter. Now, this is the Zwift World Series, so it's full of high caliber racers and lots of verified badges, ticks, jerseys, you name it. So I'm going to be taking you through this race from the beginning. So this race started fairly comfortably. We were making our way out on this flat portion of the course and it was quite mundane. Everyone knew what was coming. Everyone was prepared for the climb. And to be honest, the only real people I think that were wanting to get in a breakaway today are the type of people who maybe weren't expecting much from themselves up the climb. So if you know me at all, you will know that I would be saving my matches for this climb. I was coming off of the hill climb season here in the UK. I was maybe a couple of kilos heavier actually than I was at the British Hill Climb Championships, but that doesn't matter. I was here to push myself and see where I would stack up against some of the best in the virtual world. And we are racing here for restart. We had a good strong contingent. There was quite a few of us here in this race, and actually I should explain on the left hand side, if you're seeing those names sort of light up over my power data in the top left hand corner, that is us on Discord. We are part of a voice chat, so we can talk kind of like a team radio. It's a really cool dynamic that I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with that do Zwift racing. It's a good way of socializing during a race, or keeping in touch with tactics, or hatching a plan, or just giving encouragement. Or actually breathing very heavily and annoying your other teammates down the microphone. Now, we are going to fast forward because actually very little happens for a good while. And although this is quite a long course, we really don't see much action until we get about a half an hour in. You can see there's a heck of a lot more color on my graph now. And for those of you that don't know, when you start to press harder in Zwift, you start to see more color on this graph at the bottom. It's a really cool way to see and measure your real time and your past 10-minute effort. So obviously the darker the color or the brighter the color, red, yellows, they indicate that I'm starting to definitely press a lot harder. And really I'm just responding to what's happening in the group. You know, this section here where people know we're coming a lot closer to the climb now. There's people trying to pop off the front. There's this section of road which is very rolling, so it's constantly up and down, and the bunch will string out as we go down one of these slight sort of declines, and then all of a sudden it'll bunch up as we start going up one of the short inclines, and it has this elastic effect which you've no doubt seen maybe on TV if you watch any professional racing. Thankfully there's no crosswinds in virtual racing, so it's a slightly easier to stay within the group. Now I'm going to zap forward ever so slightly to maybe 1 or 2 kilometers before the climb. The reason why I chose this race to do like a little breakdown, for one, it has been recommended to me a few times that I should do more Zwift racing breakdowns, because I like to do longer races. More often than not, people want to see a shorter version of those longer races. But I do make my way to the front here now, as I know we are a couple of corners away from the climb. Now, thankfully, leading up to this point, it's been fairly hard. You can see in the top left-hand corner, my average power has been around 290 watts. And that's an indication that it's been, fairly hard, but we've only been racing for 30 minutes, so it's not too hard. To give you some context, my FTP probably around the time of this race, it was about 340, 350 watts. Now, as I said, coming off the hill climb season, I kind of had some peak 3-minute power outputs around 500 watts, Peak 5-minute power outputs at around 450, 460 watts. However, this climb we're just about to hit is a little bit of an unknown territory for me. And I know it's going to take me over 5 minutes, but I'm not quite sure how the race is going to pan out. Like I said, there's a bunch of riders here who are phenomenally strong. And there's really no hiding place when you hit the grade or when you hit gradients as steep as this. So I settle into what is going to be a rather painful next couple of minutes, and we'll whiz through it. But this is probably the main feature point of this video, because really this is where the damage is done. And we hit the bottom of it, and you can still see our speed at the top there. 30 kilometers per hour, 29 kilometers per hour. You know, we're going up a 7% gradient, but now we're starting to get into almost double figures in terms of the percentages you can see in the top right hand corner. I'm sat somewhere in the top 20, but it's quite difficult to tell. And now you can see my power at the bottom of the screen is matching the color of the gradient as we get to 9 and 10%, which is marked by the red, the deep red color on the graph there. So I know it's going to be a hard start. Mentally preparing yourself, because you know that essentially this is where the split is going to be made. And there's been plenty of moments both in virtual racing like this and real world racing that I can recall where, you know, the first couple of minutes of the climb, especially if it's a decisive part of the whole race, are more often than not going to be the hardest before things start to sort of settle down. But when I say settle down, you know, it's not going from, say, you know, 450 watts that we're doing here to 350. You know, there's a very small drop, as you will see in a couple of minutes. So I'm just trying to hang on. I know there's a short bit of recovery coming. You can start to see it coming into view at the top there. Can you see where it goes from red to blue? That's indicating that there's a drop in the gradient, and it actually goes pretty much completely flat for about 10 to 20 seconds. Now, I want to make sure that I'm still within range of sitting on people's wheels here. Now, this is incredibly hard. Like you can see my face. I may not be showing signs of pain. You know, the effort is still playing catch up. We're only, you know, a minute and a half, 2 minutes into this effort so far, and it's going to be near enough a 10-minute effort. So heart rate is creeping up, 175. I'm still sitting over 400 watts, but I know there's a breaking point. And my breaking point is going to be different to other people's breaking points. You know, this is where riders' strengths, riders' weaknesses, you know, everybody's different. So you might see riders hit their exhaustion point a lot earlier than others. You know, and to be honest, I didn't really know where that would be. So my goal was to essentially just try and hang on until I thought there would be a breaking point, and then there might be a bit more of a steadier climb from here to the top. And if you look closely at the top right hand corner, you can start to see the little red blobs just start to separate a bit more. And actually I am losing the front group ever so slightly here, so there's separation happening between myself and the front sort of 15. But don't panic, I just keep pushing over the top, to coin the term, till it goes negative. The OGs of you will know that term, no doubt. Just trying to push on, just trying to keep in the draft, because that is incredibly important. If you just ease up there, you will lose bike lengths. And I know it hurts, but just trying to hold that wheel is really of utmost importance. Now, there's a lot of familiar names in here, as I'm sure you are aware. But these are top riders. And I managed to slide to the front, which was good positioning for myself, so that I could give myself a little bit of sliding room, a couple of seconds maybe of being at the front, and then you gradually slide back as the climb goes on. And not necessarily of your own doing. You know, you're not trying to slide back, but, you know, if the worst case scenario happens and the pace starts to get really hard, then you've got that room. So what we're looking at now is the hardest part of the climb, in my opinion. It's where people are going to start to go out the back door. And it has gradually settled down. You can see the slight change in the color of the graph. It's not quite deep red. It's a slightly paler red. And so as time goes on, if you can hang on just a couple of extra seconds here and there, a little bit longer, it just means you might be, that 1 or 2 places further ahead when you crest that climb. And obviously that's just an ideal scenario. Well, the ideal scenario is actually you get over the top of the climb in the front group and there's no problems at all. But that's an ideal world. We don't always live in the ideal world. And sometimes you've got to make the best of a situation that is kind of out of your control. Now, I really dig deep here to try and stay within, touching distance of the group. I can see the people that have been slightly distanced are actually still very high quality riders who are just behind me, by a couple of seconds. And as we crest the climb, there was a crucial moment of decision making to be done here. Because we weren't going to go downhill straight away. And I had the live chat open, and it's really difficult sometimes to read the live chat. At the time, there was 370 to 400 riders watching live, or cyclists watching live, viewers watching live. And there was lots of debate as to whether or not it was best to wait or whether to push on. And to be honest, I made a split-second decision to push on here. I could see the gap to the little group behind. They crested the climb and there was nearly 10-second gap. Now, the gap to the front group, in my opinion, was unbridgeable. I was never going to get back to it. There was essentially they had ridden away from me based on strength alone. Like there's no denying it. When you get dropped up a climb, you're dropped by a stronger rider. And in this case, lots of riders pulled away, so I knew I wasn't the strongest. So it was an impossible task to get back to the front unless they completely sat up, and it would be a tactical sort of decision by them to stop riding or to stop riding together and to start attacking each other, and then maybe I'd get back on. But it's highly unlikely because actually we have a big descent coming up. So it was in my best interest, I think, to keep riding. And I had a rider with me for company. And I knew if I got to the descent and we still had a 10 to 20 second gap to that group behind, I might have a chance to get to the bottom of the epic KOM and then maybe settle into time trial mode. And when we got to the top of the climb, some of you may notice now that the physics, the gameplay in Zwift has changed a little bit. So the descending aspect has now become a little bit more of a, I wouldn't say a challenge, but there's a fine art to it. You can really no longer kind of draft people properly when you're going downhill, obviously as you would in the real world. So I actually get dropped like a stone by this rider in front of me, and I have to try and keep the pressure on myself here to descend solo, essentially. And this descent, notoriously, let me know in the chat, I'm sure those of you that race or ride on this course, you'll know what I'm talking about. But this descent is sometimes torture because there's a couple of little kickers that you've got to put in some effort on. It's certainly not one like Abdul Zwift where you can just, plummet down and you just freewheel the whole time. So it's quite hard. But getting down to the bottom was a blessing, because I realized that I still had a gap to the group behind, albeit now it was very close. It was only 7 seconds to Voyassen and Nair. And I thought to myself, again, we're in a situation where do we wait or do we push on? At the moment, I'm in 12th. That's a really good position to be in. If I can consolidate it, then potentially, a 12th place finish is not to be snuffed at. And I think if I come to the finish line with the likes of the guys chasing me behind, then I might get beaten fair and square in the sprint. So in this situation, do you know what? I'm going to put all my eggs in this basket and I'm just going to bury myself for a couple of minutes and see mentally where we end up. Because I don't have to necessarily commit to this move for the next 9-10 kilometers. I don't have to fully commit all the way to the finish line. Sometimes when you're caught between two groups, or if there's a group behind you chasing, if you show willing, you show an injection of pace, you show strength. You don't necessarily have to be strong, but if you show that you've got watts and you've got power to give, then it might just put off the chase behind, or, you know, they only have to be disorganized for a couple of seconds, or, you know, a minute or two, or someone has to hesitate, or someone has to say, I'm not chasing, you know, I'm tired, I'm just going to sit on, you know, anything. Then the ball is in my court. So I make the most of this little section here, maybe the next 2 or 3 minutes, and I keep pushing on until I get out of these S's. Don't get me wrong, you know, I'm riding as hard as I can here, because I know that the group behind, even if they are slightly messing around, you know, I don't know that for sure, but if they are, then I still need to make the most of this section. If I ease off slightly now, because I've consolidated this gap, like, I can just monitor the gap then as we get closer to the finish. And if the gap gets too close, then I can up it again. And that's where kind of, you know, having patience and knowing your body and riding the power and being very patient and knowing your limits is very important. And I think you see that certainly more so well, certainly in people that race quite often, you know, and that goes for the virtual racing as well as real world racing. You know, people are more sort of in tune with their body from, you know, a mind muscle connection. You know, when you're always doing training sessions and always training, you know, that's a different kind of connection you have with your body. But when you race, you know, you have to have instinct. You have to know, like, when to push on, when to ease off, you know, when to give more, when to fully commit, when to not commit, you know, and a lot of that is down to practice. And sometimes, you know, it doesn't matter how much you race, you can be in situations that you've never encountered before. And every day's a school day. You know, it's not necessarily right what I'm saying, but in this situation, you know, it's the tactic I went with. I know I'm fully committed to it. As we get around the volcano, we only have, you know, a couple of kilometers to go. I can sense that I'm flagging, you know, I'm really flagging. Essentially, I've just done one big climb, you know, up the grade. I've turned myself inside out to try and stay with that front group, which didn't really work. But then I've not really had much recovery on the descent before then having to go again and almost doing another grade, almost doing another climb, in effect. You know, that's exactly what the effort is like. You know, straight back to threshold or above threshold, actually, to try and maintain this gap and to hold off the group behind. You know, it's never a done deal. Even with 2 kilometers to go, I kind of think to myself, you know, that gap is still not a comfortable gap. You know, these riders behind are elite level racers, you know, extremely high levels of fitness, extremely high levels of recovery, you know, just like myself. But I have to be very wary that, you know, someone might have something left. And if they have a 10 watt per kilo, you know, 1 minute attack left in them, and they launch here with 2 kilometers to go, they can close a 10-second gap. You know, they can close a 15-second gap. You really don't know. And if I'm slowly starting to fade, then, you know, the ball is in their court, like I said, about finishing strong. Mentally, they'll have a lot more to give if they know they can, you know, close that gap, or they see that gap closing to catch me. Thankfully, though, I crest this last little bit. You can see, oh, my head is swinging. I am giving it everything just to get to this last little descent here, which is, this bit here is always the best bit, because I know, you know, generally, like, you can just keep the speed up here a little bit with very little effort, and then you can roll into downtown and you can just, well, not necessarily cruise over the finish line, but yeah, you can definitely enjoy it a little bit more. That front group, though, they are, well, quite frankly, miles ahead. Obviously the benefit of being in a group, but I have a few more Zwift World Series races coming up in the next couple of months, because there was a little bit of an issue, and they've had to postpone them until a future date. But I'm looking forward to those, and obviously the 500 of you watching, I'm pretty sure you'll be looking forward to coming back and watching those races live as well. I'm hoping to be in better shape, fingers crossed. Although, you know, I was in good shape here, but I mean better shape as in maybe a little bit more suited to the really hilly climbs we have in the final round, or the final 2 rounds. So really excited to race those, and can't wait to bring you that in the live stream. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see more, of course, I will gladly do more. I quite enjoy it, to be honest. So yeah, thanks for watching. Subscribe if you're new and like the video too. I will see you in the next one.